claiming that he alone will be able to restore confidence in institutions and fight corruption. Boakai has pledged to invest in infrastructure and alleviate the extreme poverty still suffered by most Liberians.
74%. That's how many of President Boakai's first 100-day promises are already stamped, done, or in motion, while most governments are still fumbling for the light switch. Imagine a government that doesn't just talk, but does. Today, we're taking a walk, pillar by pillar, through the projects turning that impressive statistic into real-world bridges, eggs, courtrooms, and hopefully, a brand new Liberian story. Section 1. Agriculture. From import lines to poultry pride. Remember those 2023 headlines, warning that Liberia could spend a staggering $200 million just to import basics like rice, chicken, and eggs. It was a stark reminder of the country's reliance on external sources for fundamental food security. So what did the administration do? They answered with a single bold $26 million wager to build Liberia's very first industrial-scale hatchery and a blending fertilizer plant right next to each other in Salala. This wasn't just about throwing money at a problem. It was a strategic move towards agricultural independence. Construction crews broke ground in March, and by July, believe it or not, the hatchery was already churning out its first 30,000-day-old chicks a week. Once they hit full capacity next June, this farm will be pushing out a staggering 200,000 eggs every single day, which should knock about 15% off our annual egg import bills. That's a big deal. But here's the real game changer for local farmers. The attached fertilizer bagging unit is now mixing 100 metric tons of NPK daily, at half the price we used to pay for those old Moroccan imports. Think about it. A bag that cost $48 last year. Now it's just $27. And get this, the government even keeps a $2 levy from each sale, funneling it straight into an agriculture resilience fund. Smart, right? These early numbers might seem small at first glance, but imagine multiplying that impact across 170,000 smallholder cocoa, rice, and vegetable growers. The central bank actually projects this could shave a full percentage point off food inflation by 2026. Sure, critics might call the timeline a bit optimistic, but even the skeptics have to admit, our once pigeon-sized local egg market is suddenly laying some pretty golden optics. Section 2. Roads, gravel, asphalt, and a promise to arrest isolation. Liberia's road density still languishes at a mere 0.25 kilometers per 100 square kilometers. That's why the R in President Boakai's arrest agenda, representing agriculture, roads, rule of law, education, sanitation, and tourism, is arguably the most visually impactful. You know, the kind of project you can actually see making a difference. The first major bite of this apple is the 90-kilometer Banga-Ganta stretch. It's not just getting a facelift. It's been widened from 6 meters to 11 and resurfaced with concrete instead of that tricky laterite. What's the payoff? Commute time between the country's second and third largest cities plummeted from 3 hours to a mere 90 minutes. Truckers are even reporting that axle repair bills are down by 30%, a welcome relief for their bottom line. Further south, the Virginia-Barnesville Shoreline Road is finally getting the revetment wall it desperately needs, especially after storm surges wiped out 300 meters last rainy season. The $48 million contract, inked with the Portuguese-Liberian joint venture, is already 40% complete. It's set to seamlessly tie into the Japanese-funded Japan Bypass extension, creating a coastal ring road. This isn't just a scenic route. It'll keep roughly 2,500 cargo trucks a day from rumbling through central Monrovia, easing traffic and wear and tear on city streets. But perhaps the biggest headline grabber is the proposed AFB-financed North-South corridor, designed to connect Buchanan Port all the way to Voinjama. Feasibility funding is already approved, and cabinet sources are buzzing that a $420 million finance package could hit the cabinet table before December. If that loan gets inked, travelers will slice a full 5 hours off the Buchanan-Zor Drive. More importantly, Liberia will finally get an internal freight spine that doesn't solely start or end in the capital, opening up new possibilities for trade and development across the nation. Section 3. Health. One lab to rule them all. Ebola survivors still recall the agonizing wait, sending blood samples to Senegal or South Africa, and waiting weeks, sometimes months, for results. That heartbreaking memory directly fueled the new government's decision to break ground on the National Clinical Diagnostic and Treatment Laboratory in Kakata last February. This isn't just any lab, it's a state-of-the-art facility. Built with a substantial $18 million from the World Bank and an extra $4 million from the Global Fund, this 6,000 square meter facility is seriously impressive. It houses level 3 biosafety cabinets and gene sequencers capable of running 2,000 polymerase chain reaction tests a day. That's cutting-edge stuff. More importantly, it's slated to become the reference lab for the entire Mano River Union. That means it'll be charging neighboring countries a service fee, potentially making the building self-sustaining within 5 years. Talk about a smart investment. The Ministry of Health has also quietly rolled out a digital results portal. Now 70% of lab reports reach clinicians via its SMS within 24 hours, a far cry from the week-long courier chaos of 2019. Construction is 85% done, and certification is slated for December. But the administration is already counting this as a major win, not least because the very announcement helped Liberia secure a $10 million research partnership with the Africa Centers for Disease Control. One virologist even joked that the building is the only place where being positive is actually a plus for the nation. Section 4. Rule of Law. Opening the War Crimes Office. Closing the impunity gap. For 14 long years, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report gathered dust, a painful reminder of unresolved justice. President Boakai decided to change that narrative. In April, he signed an executive order creating the Office of the War and Economic Crimes Court. It's a powerful statement. The budget for this fiscal year is modest, just $1.2 million, but legal advisors insist the real asset here isn't the cash. It's the green light to request international judicial assistance, a critical step toward accountability. A chief prosecutor, nominated in July, has already requested case files from the Finnish trial of Aliu Kosaya and the Swiss proceedings against Eliud Digger. This shows they mean business. The outreach unit isn't sitting still either. They're touring rural counties to gather victim statements. So far, 4,000 interviews have been transcribed and 1,200 gravesites geotagged. Government polling indicates that a solid 61% of citizens back the court, even though some ex-warlords are warning the move could reopen old wounds. Analysts, however, counter that impunity has already cost Liberia roughly $800 million in illicit mining concessions since 2006. The first indictments aren't expected until 2026, but the symbolism alone has already helped the country clear the final hurdle for an IMF program worth $90 million over 3 years. This is about more than just justice. It's about rebuilding trust and ensuring a stable future. Section 5. Mining. $1.4 billion concentrator, billion-dollar hopes. ArcelorMittal's new concentrator plant in Yekepa isn't just shiny machinery. It's a massive bet that Liberia can climb the value chain in its most critical sector. This facility takes 35% Fe iron ore and cranks out a much more valuable 66% Fe concentrate, adding roughly $40 per ton in export value. When it's running at full tilt, it'll process 15 million wet metric tons a year, enough to generate an estimated $180 million in royalty and tax revenue for Liberia over the mine's lifespan. That's a significant boost to the national coffers. President Boakai himself flew to Nimba for the ribbon cutting in May, and immediately signed a side agreement to train 300 local engineers a year at the University of Liberia's new mining department. Critics do point out that employment will peak at 1,200 direct jobs, which is a modest figure in a labor market of 2.2 million. However, the government quickly highlights the multiplier effect. Every mining job supports 5 service jobs, according to central bank modeling. It's about creating a ripple effect throughout the economy. The deal also includes a 30% rail tariff discount for third-party users. This concession could finally make Nimba's yet untapped iron ore deposits competitive, opening up even more economic potential. Finance Ministry bean counters are already predicting that this plant alone will push projected GDP growth from 4.9% to 6.1% next year. That's a tangible leap forward for the Liberian economy. Section 6. Wallet Relief. Why rice tariffs went on vacation. Here's a stark fact. Liberians spend roughly 48% of their household income on rice, the highest ratio in all of West Africa. Knowing this, the administration slashed a 14% import tariff in May, instantly knocking $65 off a 50 kilograms bag. The relief was immediate, if temporary. This measure is set to expire in December, but inflation watchers quickly recorded a 2-point dip in food CPI within just 6 weeks. While importers passed on only 70% of the cut, keeping the rest as margin, consumers still cheered the welcome break. The government did lose about $8 million in expected revenue, but the Trade Ministry argues this move buys crucial time until domestic production ramps up under the fertilizer project we discussed earlier. Now, here's the million-dollar question. Will President Boakai reinstate the tariff in January and risk street protests, or will he extend the holiday and potentially blow a hole in the budget? Parliament insiders are whispering about a potential middle ground, a sliding scale duty, 0 up to 250,000 tons, then rising to 10% thereafter. It's a delicate balancing act, but one that directly impacts every Liberian family's dinner table. Section 7. International Bragging Rights, UNC seat, and what it buys. June delivered another massive headline. Liberia won a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council for 2026 to 27. They beat the regional queue after an impressive 23 rounds of balloting. The campaign wasn't cheap. It cost $1.7 million in shuttle diplomacy, but diplomats are quick to point out that the seat pays significant dividends. We're talking about a $50 million increase in development commitments from EU states, faster consideration of a $60 million World Bank education grant, and a symbolic return to respectability after years of peacekeeping dependence. The Foreign Ministry isn't just celebrating. They're planning to use this powerful platform to push for a UN-backed climate risk insurance scheme for small coastal states. If adopted, Liberia could receive up to $80 million in premiums for reef restoration and early warning systems. That's real money for real environmental protection. Skeptics might call it diplomatic vanity, but the very election keeps the country firmly in the good graces ledger, especially as the US Congress debates a $35 million MC threshold program. This isn't just about prestige. It's about leveraging international standing for concrete national benefits. So, which of these projects would you bet your last Liberian dollar on? Drop your pick in the comments below. And hey, if you want updates when the UNSC gavel finally lands in our lap, smash that subscribe button. Don't forget to share this with that cousin who still insists nothing ever changes. Maybe this will give them something to think about. Just 17 months ago, the common talk was all about debt, darkness, and disappointment. Today, what a difference. Concrete mixers are humming in Kakata, chicks are chirping in Salala, and iron ore is rolling down the Yekipa rail. Now, let's be clear. None of these projects is a silver bullet. Challenges like high public debt, persistent youth unemployment, and the ever-present threat of climate change remain stubbornly on the books. But here's the thing. The administration's 74% delivery rate within its first 100 days shows a bureaucracy that can actually move dirt, not just paper. If the fertilizer plant keeps its price promise, if the War Crimes Office files its first case, if those roads truly reach the villages they now bypass, Liberia could very well swap its old recovery script for a vibrant development narrative written on its own terms. The next chapter is still unwritten, but for the first time in decades, the pen feels like it's firmly in Liberian hands.